For those people unfamiliar with my voice, my name is Peter Mingles. We run a company called PM Marketing. Some people call us as Network Leads, and some people call us as the Gourmet Leads guys. Icebreakers are real simple. We'll start to talk about those things. Now, when we start to introduce icebreakers, I'm going to remind you of our rewind, fast-forward philosophy. Imagine if you were videotaping something where you could rewind it, right? Here's the event that's happening like right now, and if you wanted to, you could rewind, and then you could fast forward. I'm going to rewind, and then I'm going to see where I am now, and I'm going to fast forward. So it's always rewind, fast forward. So let's talk about icebreakers for a second, and we'll apply this rewind, fast forward technique. You're working over the phone, you're calling a lead. So the phone rings, and what does the lead do? Well, let's be inside the mind of the prospect. Let's be inside their head for a second. Because if we know what's going on with them, we could work with them better. So let's rewind. What were they doing first? Let's rewind their videotaped life, 30 or 40 seconds. What were they doing? They weren't waiting for your call, most likely. So what were they doing? I mean, you got your choices. I mean, if you're going to dial 10 people tonight, all those 10 people are doing probably something different, but something. They were either watching television or sleeping or getting up from a nap or on their way to work. They could have been anywhere. They could be cooking. They could be in the middle of doing laundry. They could be in the middle of checking report cards with the kids. They could be doing homework. They'd be cleaning out a diaper. I have no clue what they're doing, but we know they were doing something else first. Smart people, people that are developing icebreaker scripts, they need to remember that or recognize that. Icebreakers recognize or need to recognize that the prospect was probably doing something else first. So you have to break their preoccupation. Here's another thing with icebreakers, a good icebreaker versus a bad one. A good icebreaker generates two questions. Why should I continue to listen to you, and what is it? Why should I continue to listen to you, and what is it? Let's continue with this whole philosophy of understanding what is happening in the mind of your prospects. If you can read their minds, if you can find out what they're thinking, then you're going to be able to work with them better. What are they thinking about? I don't know. Maybe the same things you think about. When they come to the phone, they usually say to themselves, if I know who it is, I'm going to do this. If I don't know who it is, and especially if I think it's like a sales guy, I'm going to do this. Everybody's got their own philosophy, but here's more or less the way it works. Let's use some examples. If it's your next-door neighbor and you always talk to your next-door neighbor because he calls you all the time, when he calls, you make a decision. Hey, Joe, you call me all the time. I'm in the middle of something or I'm not. If I have the time, I'll talk to him. If I don't have the time, I'll just put him off, and that's okay. So that's the way we deal with people we know. And then there's the other one, people you don't know. Well, how do you deal with them? Well, everybody's got their own philosophy, but here's usually the way it works. If people are calling and you don't know who they are, and you think they're a sales guy, usually you blow them off. Your brain starts going, if I don't know who you are, you're probably trying to sell me something, and now I have to do whatever I do or say naturally, whatever my philosophy or strategy has been to get you off the phone. What do I have to do to get out of this as fast as I can is the way most people start thinking. Why is it that way? Well, look at the last 100 phone calls that they received. Well, there were people they knew and people they didn't know. If I were to ask you to categorize the people that they don't know, and what were those people looking for, what would it be? Well, one of the obvious ones is the guy was trying to sell me something. So everybody's got this predictable pattern or how they handle people when they do those things. They initiate these reflex responses. A reflex response we call an RR. It's the things that people do or say many times without thinking. So many times if you use a bad icebreaker that triggers a reflex response, it sounds something like, I'm not interested, or I don't know what you're talking about, I never did that. When the conversation is going downhill, don't listen to anything they say. It may not be real. Conversation is going downhill, it's going downhill. It takes a very talented person to be able to flip that one around. Great example. Conversation going downhill, and now all of a sudden you decide that you want to play Quincy, like the forensic detective. Right? So conversation going downhill, and you say, well, when do you think you did something like that? 2.5 years ago. Oh, no, he's not here right now. Oh, I don't even remember doing that. I never did anything else like that. Oh, no, my cousin does something like that. They make stuff up. So one of the things you want to remember is when conversation's going downhill, what comes out of their mouth after that, holy smokes, never take it for face value. Icebreakers. Remember what's going on in their mind. What are they thinking? Well, if I know who you are, I do this. If I don't know who you are, I do this. And especially if you sound like a sales guy, I do this. But if you call up and you sound like a sales guy because your approach stinks or your icebreaker stinks, what if it's designed to sound like a sales guy? I watch some of the scripts that some people use. I'm like, where did you get that from? Who did this? These are what we call, by the way, predictable patterns. Predictable pattern is when you do things or you see things the way they start, and you can almost predict how they're going to end. That's why we call it a predictable pattern. So it starts this way, has a tendency of ending in a similar fashion. Well, an example of a PP, a predictable pattern, is this. I deliver a really bad icebreaker. Sounds like a sales guy. The person says, I'm not interested. He hangs up. That's called predictable. Hey, it's not all bad. Sometimes things start off well. Things end up well. Predictable pattern. Let it roll. What if it's a predictable pattern? Starts off a certain way and it always ends bad. Well, either let it go and just deal with it, or don't deal with it, or change it. Sometimes you can change these predictable patterns. The right kind of predictable pattern, when you teach the guy the right icebreaker, he breaks the ice, he has some cool conversations with people, they go to the website if that's what they're doing, and he sponsors more people. That's called good. If what you're doing is working for you and lots of other people, and it takes technique as opposed to talent to be able to deliver that, let her roll. I mean, you're on track, but you don't need any of this stuff. But if what you're doing isn't working, or what you're doing you think could have some improvement, then listen for the next few minutes as we discuss what makes a good icebreaker versus what makes a bad icebreaker. Good icebreakers. A couple of things. Number one, we said it earlier, breaks the person's preoccupation. They were doing something else, we have to break their preoccupation. We have to earn the right to get some of their attention. Sometimes their initial mood means nothing, whether they're going to be a good prospect or not, but you have to break them out of that mood. So a good icebreaker is going to help you do that. A good icebreaker generates two questions. Why should I continue to listen to you? And what is it? So 20 to 60 seconds it takes to deliver a good icebreaker. Some people are saying, well, how do you mean? Let me explain in English. 20 to 60 seconds, where you're going to talk continuously for 20 to 60 seconds. How do I mean by that? Let me say it another way. You're going to hog the conversation for 20 to 60 seconds. You're going to take a deep breath, pull out all your punctuation, you're going to let it roll, and you're not going to let them say something for the next 20 to 60 seconds. Let me tell you why I do that. But I have found that in the first 10 or 20 seconds, there's hardly anything that they ever say that I want to hear. Why is that? Because it's usually in the first 10 or 20 seconds, if they're going to reflex response me, like if they're going to say, I'm not interested, or I'm not really, I never did anything like that, or, oh, I must have done that, but I've kind of decided against it. In the 20 to 60 seconds, many times you're going to generate those two questions. Why should I continue to listen to you, and what is it? What should you do? Break their preoccupation because they were doing something else? What else should you do? Right? You should generate those two questions. Why should I continue to listen to you, and what is it? And it should last about 20 to 60 seconds. There's some people on the phone that said, I think I could probably do or design an icebreaker from there. Can you give me some of the words that you'd use? I'd say, okay, sure. So let's talk about the words and building an icebreaker. Now, for this one, I'm going to use a visual. We're going to call it your icebreaker string. This is your icebreaker string. Now, I want you to envision or imagine in your mind a string. Think of about a string or a rope about 18 inches long. Pull out your icebreaker string. Use two hands. Lay it in front of you from left to right. So lay it right along there, left to right, and that's what we call your icebreaker string. There's three components: short, common, and customized. From left to right, I want you to take your real or imaginary knife and chop it 2 inches left to right. We call 2 inches short, right, relative to the rest of the string. That's the short part of the string. Left to right, that's the first little section. So if it started off as 18 inches, chopped off to, what do you have left? 16. Chopped it right about in half. The middle part is going to be called common. So the first part was short, S-H-O-R-T. The middle part is common, C-O-M-M-O-N. And the last part, that third part, right to the right, is now called customized, C-U-S-T-O-M-I-Z-E. So it's short, common, customized. Those are the three parts of your icebreaker. So if you want to build one, here's the way it works. There's a short part, 5 simple words. The 5 simple words are real simple. Even sometimes the most obvious things, left to their own devices, they wind up doing something else. They go like this: hello, and then the person's first name. This is, and then your first name. Let's assume that your lead name is Joe Smith for this example. Hello, Joe. This is Peter. So that's the first 5 words. This is so simple, anyone can do it. And it's fun. I also would like to remember what they were thinking about before they picked up the phone. When I say, hello, Joe, and then a slight pause, this is Peter. Think about you walking down a busy city street. And if you've never walked down a busy city street, people walking in the opposite direction close by, almost shoulder to shoulder sometimes. So you're walking one way, they're walking another way. Everybody's kind of preoccupied if you've ever done any kind of busy city street walk. You got a friend, Joe, you haven't seen him in 10 years. You weren't even thinking about him. And then all of a sudden, as you're walking one way and people walking in the opposite direction, somebody crosses you, kind of like in the opposite direction, and you kind of take a glimpse over there and you say, was that Joe? So 10 years later, right, he's either taller or shorter or heavier or skinnier or more hair or less hair, whatever it might be, certainly older, right? So you'd say to yourself, was that Joe? Because, again, you weren't looking for him. You weren't even paying attention, kind of walking that way. He was walking in the opposite direction. But you had a reason to turn around and say, let me see if that was him. So you spin around, you run up to him, right, you tap him on the shoulder, and he's going to turn around to see who's tapping him on the shoulder, right? So is that you? Kind of like, hello, Joe? He turns around, and he's not sure who you are, because, right, 10 years later, you're either taller, shorter, heavier, whatever, more hair, less hair, certainly older. So he grabs his gun, and just before he pummels you, you have to say in a very convincing style, it's Peter. Wait a minute, it's Peter. As he turns around to whack you, you're going to say, it's Peter. So here's why it works so well. The reason why it works well is because when you call up somebody, you say, hi, Joe, and then you pause just pregnantly for a second, then you say, this is Peter. When you say it like that, what happens is you mess up his strategy on how he was supposed to answer the phone. Because remember, how does that go? If I know who you are, I do this. If I don't know who you are and I think you're a sales guy, I do this. And it messes them up. It itches their brain just temporarily because they don't know. They haven't formed a third strategy, which is, what do I do if when I pick up the phone, I hear the voice of someone that I'm supposed to know, but I don't? It's totally different than the response you get if you use a sales-type approach that sounds something like, hi, Joe, how are you today? What are you going to say next after that? That was the short part. Let's talk about common. Common are the words that you're going to use regardless of how the lead was generated. You pick your common words. Should generate those two questions, or start to at least. Why should I continue to listen to you, and what is it? Let's take a look at some of the words that you can use. After you do the "Hi, Joe," and he says, "Oh, hi. Joe, the reason why I'm calling, I work with a business referral service. It's a little bit like an advertising and promotion company. And we pay them a bundle of money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars collectively, to go all across the country and find people that are bright, people that are sharp, that are entrepreneurial." So those are some of the things that we say. You could use any one of those words or none of them at all. You can make up your own if you want to as well. So now, one of the things that I found is usually pretty intriguing is when I say we spent a bundle of money, or we spent thousands and thousands and collectively. The reason why that stuff works is because as long as you're using terms like collectively, whether you're paying us thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars or not is immaterial, because now you're kind of bunching your money up with everybody else's money that might be paying us. But those are some of the things that I say in the common part. So I'll say, we work with a business referral service. We pay them a ton of money to go all across the country and find people that are bright, people that are sharp, people that are entrepreneurial. Remember, you say these words all strung together. This is part of that 20 to 60 seconds. And why do you string them together? Because if you stop, they'll start. So don't use words that they're going to have to try to figure out. Use words that are going to generate those two questions. Why should I continue to listen to you, and what is it? That's the common part. The next part is called customize. Customize is how you're going to probably customize the rest of your icebreaker towards how that lead was generated. If it was generated over the phone, you're probably going to tell them it's generated over the phone. If it was generated through the Internet, you're probably going to tell them it was generated through the Internet. This is the customized portion. It both satisfies and generates curiosity all in the same kind of sentences. So say, for instance, we're going to work with a telephone profile lead, because that's one of the types of leads that we have. We interviewed the person. Among other things, we asked them what kind of work they did, what do they like least about their job, and then what do they like most about their job. And for this example, I'm going to use Joe, right? Our friend Joe is a teacher, and he likes being a teacher. Those are the things he likes. Things he doesn't like about being a teacher is working with parents. So we're going to call Joe. We're going to go from front to back, and we're going to use the short, common, and the customize. Customizing using the information, of course, we have on the lead. "Hi, Joe." "Oh, hi. This is Peter." "Joe, the reason why I was calling is I work with a business referral service, and we pay them a ton of money to go all across the country and find people that are bright, people that are sharp, people that are entrepreneurial. And recently, this company actually did a telephone interview with you recently and mentioned that you were a teacher and that you liked being a teacher. You just didn't like working with the parents. Joe, the reason why I was calling is I wanted to follow up on a telephone interview and ask you a couple of questions. By the way, how long have you been a teacher?" Now, if you track me on that one and start to record it, if I were talking to someone, of course, I'd speak a little slower. But what would happen now is that's going to take anywhere from 20 to 60 seconds. You get them to talk about just about anything. Here's the interesting thing. When they talk about anything, they have a tendency of opening up. So what's anything? Anything could be about him being a teacher. Anything could be about the dogs that were barking in the background. It could be something that's happening in the news, or something that's happening with the weather, or it could be just about anything. So the keys to an icebreaker are going to be short, common, customize. Short, "Hi, Joe. This is Peter." Common. Those are the words you use regardless of how. Now, the reason why that approach works so well, for the obvious reasons, it takes some time, but also it sprinkles in some information that separates us from being just a cold caller. What about a lead that's generated over the Internet? Well, you're probably going to use the same short, and you're going to use the same common, and you might just use a different customize. Here's the short, common, and customized for a lead that's generated over the Internet. You might say something like, "Hi, Joe. This is Peter. Joe, the reason why I was calling is I work with a business referral service, and we pay them tons of money to do some advertising with us. And recently they did some advertising on the Internet, and you must have clicked on one of our websites and filled out some information on a form. And I like to call people back, Joe, because I don't think they ever get all the information from the website, especially with a short time, as some people have a tendency of clicking on stuff on the web." So when I call them back, I usually ask them some questions. Questions like, what are you really looking for? What do you really want? And sometimes they say things like, Peter, I really am looking for a way to maybe make some extra money, or maybe do something better, or maybe something different, or perhaps even work from home. So I figured I'd call you, Joe, and ask you, what do you really want? Or what are you really looking for? Is it one of those four things, whether it's to either make some extra money or do something better or different, or perhaps even work from home? What do they say when you're done? Well, they usually say one of those four things. I'm looking to make some extra money, or I'm looking to do all the above, or I'd really want to find something working from home. It's awkward initially, especially that one if you're going to use a longer icebreaker, because you're not used to talking that much, with a lead at least, all at once. And it's going to be a little uncomfortable, and I'll tell you in advance what's going to happen in your mind. You're going to say, should I stop? Should I pause? Should I see if they're there? And very rarely will I ever pause or stop or see if they're there. Now, the next part that some people ask me is, well, what do you do next? So you deliver that great icebreaker, and the person says, well, I'm interested in making some extra money. What do I do next? Well, the next thing would be is you say, what would motivate you to want to make extra money? Those are some great conversations to see what kind of prospect you're working with, and how they answer will kind of tell you where you're at with those people. Well, I want to do that because I hate my job. Oh, what is it that you hate about your job? What do you do now? And the conversation just starts. And that's where that conversationally qualifying stuff happens, and we've moved into the interview. So we went from the icebreaker and those conversations like, well, what motivates you to do that? Bring you right into that interview where you can find out if more than less likely this is the type of person you want to talk to. So those are the 3 phases of working lead like we went earlier, and then also the icebreaker stage. Why should you learn how to master an icebreaker? Well, it's real simple. First of all, they're fun. Second of all, they're relatively simple, especially if you have the words. If you had to try to figure out the words on your own, it might be a little bit tougher. But I just gave you all the words that you'll need at least to get started. Even if they're a lead, I can't control what they were doing before you called them. Rewind a little bit, right? Say, what were they doing before? So you remember those things as you break in your ice. The other thing I just want to close up on is remember what happens afterwards. This is that fast forward. How do we mean fast forward? Well, when they hang up, what are they going to be thinking? Remember, because you're going to follow up with them afterwards, so you have to think about what are they going to be thinking. This is one of the reasons also why I like to take a low-key approach as opposed to a high-pressure approach. If you high-pressure people, many times when they hang up, what are they thinking? Geez, this guy rapid-fire interrogated me. I'm not going to go to that website. It sounds like a sale. Boy, was I uncomfortable with that call. They start thinking afterwards. You can't prevent that from happening. What are they going to be thinking about after they're done? And that's why I have always found a more casual, more friendly approach. Picking, probing questions, conversationally qualifying, of course all of that stuff is important. And I find it's just more a relaxed way of building the business, and people have a tendency to be a little bit more open for you. Okay, guys, we'll catch you later. Bye.